The email came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I had just set my alarm for 6 a.m. and was about to plug in my phone when the notification lit up the screen. Loan confirmation. Citibank. $47,500. Approved under my name and social security number. Disbursed 3 days ago. I sat on the edge of my bed and read it 4 times. Then I opened my banking app and saw the savings account I had nearly forgotten about, the one my mother had convinced me to open jointly with her 6 years ago so she could handle emergencies while I was away at college. I had meant to close it after I graduated and got my own account set up properly. I kept putting it off. Life got busy. I trusted her. The balance was $214. There had been $31,000 in that account 2 weeks ago. I don't remember standing up. I just remember being at my kitchen window, staring at the parking lot below, trying to locate gravity because it seemed to have quietly left the room. My name is Jamie Holloway. I'm 29 years old. I worked double shifts at the hospital for 3 years to build that savings account, and somewhere between Tuesday night and my mother deciding she needed a new beginning, I had become a financial instrument she forgot to put back. I called her first. She picked up on the second ring, which told me she was awake and waiting. "Hey, Mom. I need to talk to you about something." She sighed the way she always sighed when she suspected she was about to be inconvenienced. "What is it?" "It's late. There's a loan in my name. $47,500. And my savings account is empty. Can you explain that to me?" The pause that followed was not the pause of a shocked person. It was the pause of someone deciding which version of the story to use. Then she said, very calmly, "Jamie, your brother needed that money. He's been struggling. You know how hard things have been for him. We didn't think you'd miss it. Didn't think I'd miss it." I asked her how she got the loan approved without my signature. She went quiet again, then said my brother had helped her. He works in finance. He knew what paperwork to file. He told her it was a gray area. He told her family helps family. I asked her when someone planned to tell me. She said they were going to explain everything once things settled down. I asked her what things. She said life things. Then she said, "Jamie, don't be dramatic. You make good money. You'll rebuild." And there it was. The same sentence, different year. "You'll rebuild." Said the way you tell someone who dropped a pen that they can just pick it up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I said, "Don't contact me," and I ended the call. What happened next, I need you to understand, was not revenge. It was accounting. I sat down at my dining room table at midnight with my laptop, a legal pad, and the kind of focused clarity that only arrives when something final has happened to you. I opened every account, every shared document, every automatic payment that ran through anything connected to my family's stability. I started making a list. The joint savings account, already gutted. But I removed my name from it that night through the online portal and flagged the account for fraud review, which I should explain, because I know people reading this wonder, yes, even in a joint account. If one party withdraws funds and uses them in ways that were fraudulent or unauthorized, you can report it. It doesn't always go the way you want, but you report it. I called the bank's fraud line at 12:30 a.m. I spent 40 minutes on the phone. I filed everything. The loan was different. My brother had used a power of attorney document that I had signed 3 years earlier when I was sick with pneumonia and thought I was going to need someone to handle my affairs temporarily. I had signed a very broad, very foolish document because he told me it was just a precaution. He had used it to co-apply for the loan in my name, structuring it so that my credit score and income anchored the application while the funds went directly into an account my mother controlled. The attorney I spoke with 2 days later told me it was the kind of thing that technically exists in a legal gray area, but absolutely qualifies as financial fraud. When the POA is used for personal gain without the grantor's knowledge or consent. I had that document revoked before the sun came up. My brother was on my car insurance as a secondary driver. Removed. My mother was listed as my emergency contact at work. Changed. My brother was on a family cell phone plan I had been paying for since I started working full-time. Cancelled. My mother had a Netflix and a Hulu and a subscription to a meal kit service, all running on my card through an old shared account we had never bothered to separate. Cancelled. I was the co-signer on my brother's apartment lease from 2 years ago when his credit wasn't good enough to qualify on his own. I contacted his property management company first thing the next morning and formally requested to be removed from the co-sign agreement, citing financial fraud and providing documentation. That took several days to process, but I filed it immediately. My mother had a storage unit she had been renting in her name but paying with a joint account, which was now mine to close. She would need to make other arrangements. I did not call anyone. I did not warn them. I just worked. My phone started going off around noon the following day. My brother first, 6 times in an hour. Then my mother. Then my brother again. Then a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be my aunt calling from a neighbor's phone because she had already heard something was wrong. I didn't answer any of them. What I did instead was call the detective assigned to financial crimes at my local precinct, who told me that what I had described was absolutely worth pursuing, and that my documentation was unusually thorough, and that cases like this are complicated by family relationships, but not impossible. I scheduled an appointment for that Thursday. I went. I brought everything. My mother sent a text from my cousin's phone because she had apparently realized I might be screening her number. The text said, "Jamie, whatever you think happened, you need to hear our side. Your brother made a mistake, but he was trying to help himself get stable. You have always been the strong one. We knew you could handle it. Please don't do anything you'll regret." I stared at that message for a long time. You have always been the strong one. That sentence is a leash dressed up as a compliment. It means we identified that you could carry weight, and we decided that made the weight yours to carry. It means strong is not something we admire in you, it's something we harvest. I had been the strong one since I was 16 years old, and my mother sat on the kitchen floor and cried because she couldn't cover the car payment, and I handed her the $300 I had saved from babysitting. I had been the strong one when my brother got a DUI at 22, and I paid the fine and the lawyer because my mother said the family couldn't survive the shame of him having a record. I had been the strong one when my father left, and my mother needed someone to help her sort out the finances because she said she didn't understand numbers. Except that apparently she understood them well enough to file loan paperwork. I did not respond to the text. My mother showed up at my apartment on a Friday evening. I heard the knock and checked the peephole. She was standing in the hallway in a floral blouse and her good earrings, the ones she wears when she wants to be taken seriously. She had brought food. I could see the handles of a grocery bag hanging from her wrist, like a peace offering she could also eat if things went badly. She knocked 3 more times. She called my name through the door. She said, "I know you're in there, Jamie. Please. We can fix this." I sat on my kitchen counter and drank a glass of water. She stood there for nearly 15 minutes. I know because I watched the timestamp on my phone. At some point she said, very quietly, almost to herself, "I don't know where I went wrong with you." And I thought, there it is. Even now, even at the door of the apartment I pay for alone, after emptying my savings account, after forging my signature still, somehow. This is a failure of mine. She left eventually. I ordered dinner and watched a documentary about deep-sea fish. What I didn't do was fall apart. That surprised me more than anything. 3 days after she came to the door, my cousin called. She's the reasonable one in the family, always has been the person who gets assigned to deliver bad news because she can do it without screaming. She said, "I just want you to know I'm not taking sides. But your mom is really struggling. The storage unit thing was a lot. And she's scared about the loan situation." I said, "She should be scared about the loan situation. She committed fraud." My cousin was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know it looks bad, but she's your mom. You only get one." And there's that sentence. You only get one. Said as though scarcity automatically confers value. As though something being irreplaceable makes it beyond accountability. I thought about that logic for a second and said, "You also only get one credit score, and I had a great one until last Thursday." She laughed a little, despite herself. Then she got serious again and said, "What do you want to happen here, Jamie? Like, what's the actual endgame?" I told her I didn't have an endgame. I just had a boundary, and the boundary was that I was done being a resource. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't plotting anything. I was just finished. The account was closed. Not in a dramatic way. Just closed. She didn't call back after that, but she didn't come after me either, which I respected. My brother sent an email 2 weeks later. It was long, about 4 paragraphs, and it opened with "I've been doing a lot of thinking." He said he knew what he did was wrong. He said he had convinced himself that I wouldn't mind once I understood the situation, that I had always come through before, and that he had panicked and made a bad decision in a moment of desperation. He said he was sorry. He said he wanted to make it right. He listed things he could do, including a payment plan, once he got back on his feet. I read the email twice. The apology was real, I think, or at least the most real version of an apology he was capable of generating. But at the bottom of the email, after all of it, was one sentence that explained everything. He wrote, "I hope you understand that I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because I knew you were the only one who could actually save us." There it is again. Strong. Capable. The one who saves. He had forged my name on a loan application, emptied my savings with my mother's help, and his conclusion was not that he had done something monstrous. His conclusion was that he had identified the correct solution to his problem and implemented it without my inconvenient consent. He didn't see theft. He saw resourcefulness. I forwarded the email to my attorney. My mother, apparently running out of options, turned to Facebook. She didn't name me. She posted something that said, "Some people forget where they came from when they start doing well. I raised my children with nothing and gave them everything. I just hope someday they understand sacrifice." Her friends commented exactly what you'd expect. "You deserve so much better. God will repay you." Children these days have no loyalty. I didn't respond. I didn't subpost. I didn't text her to tell her to take it down. I had, the week before, quietly removed myself from every family group chat, unlinked my name from the shared family calendar, and changed my address on my medical records to my new P.O. box so that nothing sensitive would still route through any shared family touchpoint. The fraud investigation moved slowly, the way these things do. My attorney was cautious about my expectations. She said the family connection complicated things, and that my brother's use of the POA document existed in a legal zone that wasn't black and white. But the process was happening. There was documentation. There was a record. And whatever came of it legally, the financial institutions had been notified and were moving on the accounts. That was enough for now. What nobody tells you about cutting off people who are supposed to love you is that the grief isn't for the relationship you had. It's for the relationship you believed in. I didn't mourn my mother and my brother as they actually were. I mourned the version of them I had spent 29 years trying to earn. The mother who would eventually see how hard I worked and feel proud instead of entitled. The brother who would eventually grow up and stop needing rescuing. That family, the one I kept making payments toward, had never existed. I had been funding a fiction. I found a folder on my computer from 4 years ago, a budget I had built when I was trying to help my mother get out of debt. 12 months of line items. Groceries. Utilities. Her car insurance. Her credit card minimums. Her phone. A small discretionary amount I had labeled Mom Personal because I didn't want her to feel like I was controlling her spending. I sat looking at that spreadsheet for a long time. I had been so careful, so organized, so determined to fix things quietly without making anyone feel ashamed. And the whole time, from the other side of the spreadsheet, I had just looked like a resource with a recurring schedule. I wasn't the strong one. I was the convenient one. My therapist I started going in the second month, which I should have done years earlier, asked me to trace back the first time I remember feeling responsible for my family's stability. I answered without hesitating. I was 14. My mother had gotten a bill from the gas company, and she put it on the kitchen table and went to her room and closed the door. She didn't say anything. She didn't ask me to do anything. She just left it there, the way you leave a problem somewhere visible because you need someone to notice it. I picked it up. I figured out which of my weekend jobs could cover part of it. I made a plan. I told her the next morning that I had handled it. She hugged me and said, "What would I do without you?" That hug was the beginning of everything that followed. Not because hugs are bad, but because that particular hug, at that particular age, taught me something I spent the next 15 years believing. That my value to my family was proportional to my capacity to absorb their problems. Love, in that house, was a debt you paid down through usefulness. You proved your belonging by solving things. I became very good at solving things, and they became very good at generating them. My therapist asked me, "When did you first decide you were done?" I told her honestly that I didn't decide. I discovered. I discovered it the same night I discovered the empty savings account and the loan I hadn't taken out. Something just closed. Not with a slam. More like a window settling into its frame after years of being cracked open. Quiet. Final. Weatherproof. 3 months after everything happened, I ran into my aunt at the grocery store. She saw me first, and her face did something complicated. She wanted to be warm, but she also wanted to be loyal to my mother, and those two things were pulling her in opposite directions. She settled on. "You look good." I said, "Thank you." She said, "You know your mother misses you." I said, "I know." She said, "Family is family, Jamie. You know that." I thought about what to say for just a moment. Then I said, "I know. But family is also accountable. Both things can be true." She looked at me for a second like I had said something in a foreign language. Then she nodded slowly and we went our separate ways down different aisles. There was a birthday dinner in the fall, my cousin's 30th. She had insisted on a real celebration at a restaurant downtown, and she had told me directly, separately from the family group, that she wanted me there. She said she understood if I couldn't handle being in the same room as my mother and my brother, but that she genuinely wanted me present for her night. Not as a statement, not as a battleground, just because she loved me, and it was her birthday. I went. I dressed carefully, not to impress anyone, not to intimidate anyone. I just wore something I felt good in, because I had spent enough years choosing clothes based on how they'd be perceived by people who were watching me to evaluate. My mother was there, at the far end of the long table. She looked thinner than I remembered. She had a new haircut. She saw me the moment I walked in, and her face did something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not manipulation, just a kind of exhausted recognition. The way a person looks when the thing they were dreading finally arrives and turns out to be just a person. My brother was seated next to her. He looked up, looked back down at his phone, and didn't look up again. I sat next to my cousin, and we laughed, and we drank wine. And she told me about her job and her apartment and a man she had been seeing who made her feel, she said, like she was worth being patient with. Taimaneki. I told her that was the best way I had ever heard someone describe a good relationship. About an hour into dinner, my mother got up to use the restroom, and on her way back, she stopped at my chair. She didn't crouch down or lean in. She just stood beside me and said, quietly, "You look well." I looked up at her. I said, "Thank you, so do you." She stood there for a moment like there was something else she was deciding whether to say. Then she said, "I know what we did was wrong. I want you to know I know that." I didn't rush to fill the silence. I just held her eyes. She said, "I'm not asking for anything. I needed to say that out loud." I said, "I hear you." Then I turned back to my cousin and the conversation. My mother went back to her seat. She didn't speak to me again for the rest of the evening, and neither did my brother. When I left, I hugged my cousin for a long time and told her happy birthday, and she whispered in my ear, "I'm proud of you." I didn't cry until I got to my car, and even then it wasn't sadness. It was something more like relief at finally being seen accurately by someone who loved me. I drove home with the windows down. The legal situation took another 4 months to move to any kind of conclusion. My attorney was right that it was complicated. My brother eventually agreed to a repayment structure overseen by the court, and while the amount he could realistically pay back each month was modest, the documentation established clearly what had happened and who was responsible. The fraud designation on the loan was upheld by the bank, which meant my credit report was corrected and the liability was removed from my name. The savings account was harder, recovering funds from a joint account where one party had legal access. Even access that was obtained through manipulation is a longer road. Some of that money I may never see. I have made peace with that. What I got back that I didn't expect to get back was my sense of my own future as something that belonged to me. I moved apartments in December. New neighborhood, smaller place, lower rent, and I liked every square foot of it because every square foot was unambiguously mine. I painted the living room a deep green that I had always loved and never chosen because someone in my life had always had an opinion about what colors should look like. I bought a secondhand armchair and put it by the window and spent Sunday mornings there with coffee and a book and the specific silence of a place that has never absorbed anyone else's emergency. My closest friend, someone I'd known since nursing school, threw me a quiet dinner party in January. 7 people around a table. No obligation. No performance. Halfway through dinner, she raised a glass and said, "To people who finally figured out that survival and self-abandonment aren't the same thing." Everyone laughed and drank. I sat there for a second before I lifted my glass, just feeling the shape of that sentence. Survival and self-abandonment aren't the same thing. I had spent 15 years believing they were. Believing that to keep my family safe, I had to make myself available without limit. That love meant being infinitely accessible. That the cost of belonging was silence about what belonging was costing me. My mother still posts things on social media, sometimes that I assume are about me, though I no longer follow her accounts. My cousin sends me screenshots occasionally, not to stir things up, but because she thinks I should know what narrative is being built in my absence. I read them and then I close them and I don't respond, because there is no version of that conversation that moves anything forward. My brother sent a payment last month, the first one under the repayment agreement. The amount was small. The fact of it was significant. I deposited it into a savings account. I opened a loan, in my name only, at a bank my family has never heard of. Every month, another small deposit, and every deposit a very quiet statement about what things are worth and who gets to decide. I think about that email my brother sent, the one where he said he did it because he knew I was the only one who could actually save them. I used to read that sentence and feel a complicated grief, something that wanted to be touched by the trust embedded in it, even while being horrified by the violation. Now I read it differently. Now I understand that what he was actually saying was, we looked at you and saw a solution instead of a person. And somewhere along the way, I had agreed to be seen that way. Not because I was weak, because I was young, and I needed to be needed, and no one ever told me the difference between being loved and being used until the difference became impossible to ignore. This is what I know now. Choosing yourself is not a betrayal. Closing an account is not cruelty. Saying I won't bleed again to fill someone else's cup is not the same as wishing them harm. It is simply the acknowledgement that your blood has a purpose, and that purpose is your life. The people who told me I was cold, that I was selfish, that I had forgotten where I came from, they were the same people who had benefited from my warmth, my generosity, and my memory for as long as it served them. The moment I stopped serving, the character they described changed. That tells you everything you need to know about the character they were actually responding to. Where I come from is an eviction notice and a gas bill left on a kitchen table, and a 14-year-old girl who was too young to know she was being handed a job she never applied for. Where I come from is 20 years of being the answer to other people's questions until I had no idea how to ask my own. Where I come from is real, and I carry it, and it made me capable of things I am genuinely proud of. But where I come from is not where I am going. My savings account has a new balance now. Small, but mine. Built $1 at a time, by a person who finally stopped paying other people's debts long enough to notice she was allowed to have things too. I am not waiting for permission. I am not bracing for the call that changes everything. I am not the solution to a problem I didn't create. I am 30 years old, and I have a green living room and a secondhand armchair and a Sunday morning that belongs entirely to me. And on the worst nights, when the guilt still finds its way in through a crack I forgot to seal, and it still does, I won't pretend otherwise. I sit in that chair by the window, and I remember something my cousin said the night of her birthday dinner, standing in the restaurant parking lot while we waited for our cars. She said, "The hardest thing about people who love you badly is that the love is still real. It's just tangled up in all this damage, and it comes out crooked. And you can grieve the love and still protect yourself from the damage." I've been thinking about that for months. You can grieve the love and still protect yourself from the damage. Both things. At the same time. That's not coldness. That's not ingratitude. That's not a daughter who forgot where she came from. That's a person who finally learned how to hold two true things at once without letting one of them swallow her whole. I'm still learning. I'm still in therapy. I still sometimes pick up my phone to call my mother and then put it back down when I remember why I can't. That moment of reaching, I think it will probably always be there. Some reflexes are older than reason, but the reaching gets shorter every time. And the putting it down gets quieter. And the armchair by the window is still there in the morning.